the burial place of ancient dignitaries. There are so many myths and legends surrounding the Isles of Scilly, it's hard to know where fact ends and fiction begins. But that just adds to the charm of the place. A pocket paradise, which looks as if it's set in a tropical sea, but is only a short hop away from Land's End. They also call these islands the Fortunate Isles, and I'll go along with that, for not only are they beautiful and quiet and relaxing and all the good things in a travel brochure, but they have some wonderful watering holes, and all within a gentle stroll of each other along Main Street, St Mary's. The Atlantic Inn, part hotel, part pub. The Bishop and Wolf, named after the two main lighthouses of the islands. And then there's the Mermaid, where I confess I have enjoyed many a happy night. It's the first pub a visitor comes across after getting off the ferry, and many, like me, find it hard to pass by. The ferry trip, after all, is often a trifle lumpy, and a chap needs a place to regain his land legs. Closing time in the Scillies used to be relaxed, and the lock-in was common, as tourist officer Steve Watts remembers.
It's actually called staying behind. It wasn't known as lock-ins in those days. I'm not sure if it still goes on because it's not in my domain anymore. But yeah, we used to have what's called staying behind sessions now and again.
But didn't the police to pay any attention to it, or?
Not significantly, although it did come to a head when there was a local disagreement between the sergeant at the time and the landlord. They had a continually running feud, and the sergeant took exception to the 7-night-a-week staying behind sessions and organised a secret posse of highly trained policemen to secretly arrive in the island and raid the Mermaid.
A SWAT team to raid the Mermaid?
Yep, yes indeed. Yes, in the early hours of the morning, the door burst open and in they sprang.
It was one of the island's most notorious criminal acts and led to several locals and a landlord appearing before the beak. Generally, the Scillonians are a very law-abiding bunch. Another story tells of a man who, after a session in the Mermaid, drove his car a few miles home to the other side of the island. When he got there, he was so filled with remorse at drinking and driving, he drove his car back to the pub, parked it, and walked home. That was in the days when St Mary's only had the 3 pubs, and they were all within 100 yards of each other. But now a new pub has appeared on the scene in Old Town, catering for the other side of the island. The Lock, Stock and Barrel was, until a year or so ago, a joiner's shop and turkey shed, until the joiner, now landlord Guy Lock, decided to turn it all into a pub. You can tell he was a joiner by the craftsmanship that's gone into the woodwork in the place.
Well, originally I didn't see it as a pub. It was we turned them into a joinery shop, a cabinet making shop, which eventually grew into quite a large concern. Got to the stage where I was getting a bit not bored with it, but you know, wanting to do something else.
They've always struck me as pretty good drinkers over here.
Very good drinkers.
There's something that they say about Scillonian drinking.
Well, they reckon that Scilly's a bunch of rocks in mid-Atlantic with 2,000 alcoholics clinging to it. But
so all you're doing is catering for the local trade?
Exactly, yeah. I'm satisfying a niche in the market, yeah.
Meanwhile, back in the Main Street, the older pubs continue to ply their welcome trade.
The Atlantic's been an inn for a very long time, and some splendid adventures been had in there. Before my time, but I do know some of the stories about the Atlantic.
I know a drinking friend of mine used to go in Guthrie, and now Guthrie got into some trouble there, don't he?
Well, Guthrie was at one time, well, was permanently in trouble of some kind or other, but always in good taste, of course. Yes, I remember this one particular story. He burst through the door in a rainstorm. Actually, it had been raining all day, and he'd been shooting rabbits during the winter. And he had a bandolero round his neck of 12-bore cartridges. And he just took the bandolero off, lifted the lid of the stove, and threw it in the stove, put the lid down, and casually walked out. Everybody ran, except a couple of people who didn't know what was going on. And the stove exploded. When it cleared, everyone had black faces, and there was a hole in the ceiling where the lid had disappeared.
Was Guthrie banned?
No, actually, it was part of the character of the place. I mean, bizarre adventures such as that were the accepted norm.
And that's what I like about St Mary's. It is bizarre, unconventional, unpredictable. Time is irrelevant, except for the twice-a-day ritual. In the morning, at the set hour, all the visitors clamber onto the boats to the outlying islands for bird-watching, walking and sightseeing. And in the afternoon, at another set hour, they all come back again. Between rush hours, there's a chance for a little private exploration. There are bad pubs, there are good pubs, there are special pubs, and this one to me is very, very special. It's like a pilgrimage coming here. I just love the Turks Head at St Agnes. I love this job. On a warm, calm summer's day, there are few places to beat the little island of St Agnes and a visit to England's most southwesterly pub. And it seems so much more pleasurable arriving at a pub by boat. Thanks, Alex. See you later. The Turks Head is in one of the most delightful settings I know, overlooking the causeway between two coves and across to the island of Gueux, which was once owned by a chap from Wimbledon. He, incidentally, insisted that when he died, he'd be buried standing up amid the stones on the summit. Sadly, he forgot about the wild pigs that roamed the island, which made short shrift of the poor man's corpse. With only a handful of permanent residents, the pub has to make the most of the daily infusion of tourists. It's run by a couple who are spoken of in reverential tones in the world of publicans. I first met John and Pauline Dart when they were running the Lugger in Port Ruin. They ran a great pub then, and their good reputation followed them back to the Scilly.
We ran the Mermaid for 4 years. Tenants of Devonish breweries it was in those days, and them in their wisdom decided that they wanted to put managers in there, so they turned us out, and we had to leave. We had a year's notice and we had to leave, but we couldn't wait to get back here. This place is a dream to us.
What's so special about this pub? I mean, I love it just sitting here. It's got the best view in the country. It's got great beer.
The biggest problem is it is the only pub on the island. I mean, if it was an alternative, I'm sure that we would go somewhere else.
Was this always a pub here, actually, then, John?
No, it was built originally as a boathouse. I think it was owned by either the Coast Guard or Customs and Excise, and the revenue
Customs and Excise.
The revenue cutter was kept here, and these Gulf tracing the smugglers naturally from here. But it's been a pub since 1972.
So why is it called the Turks Head?
All the islanders have got nicknames, such as on St Mary's they're called bulldogs, Tresco they're called caterpillars, Briar they're called thorns.
Thorns on Briar, Ginnocks on St Martin's.
That's right, I was just about to say that. But on St Agnes they're called Turks, and because, who knows, was it because Turkish pirates came here in the 1500s?
A lot of them a bit dark.
I think the Lord Protector, Lord Godolphin, was kidnapped by Turkish pirates.
Over here?
From St Mary's, yeah.
The water off St Agnes is the colour and clarity of Bombay gin, and served just as icy cold, even in the middle of summer. But things can really get tough in the winter when the Atlantic throws everything it's got at the islands. And that's a time when the tourists disappear, and it becomes impossible to get even essential supplies to the pub.
You've got to be well organised, you've got to have things in the freezer. If you make things fresh, it's got to be able to go back into the freezer when you do it. So that there's some days we don't get boats up 5 days.
Tell him what you really do.
Because I suppose that the food can't come in, the tourists can't come in either.
No tourists either, no.
Most of the time it's sort of 3 or 4 days, winter time, and if you go longer than that, you can manage to get a boat across somehow, whether it's in here or the other side of the bar.
Well, we had an interesting time in January when the quay blew away.
Yeah.
And the seas coming right over the top of the cow. You couldn't see the cow. You couldn't see the end of the quay. It was horrendous. And we set to and did that. And I got a few of the island guys as well for the day we did the work. And we had a brilliant day. And we had 5 hours to do it in for tidal conditions. We got it all organised, set up. And we came back to the pub afterwards. Didn't stop at all during the whole day. Cleaned up, finished. These two had got a full buffet laid on. Everything. Came back into that pub. And all the islanders says the best day they've had for years, wasn't that?
The last time I came here, there was a dock strike and all sorts of things, and the beer didn't get through either, didn't it? And I had the last pint on the island, so I can honestly say I drank the islands dry. It was lovely.
It was you, was it?
It was a memorable moment, but believe me, there's no fun in being stuck on an island where the beer has run out. No trip to the Scillies can be complete without taking in the gig racing. Not so much a sport, it's almost a religion here. Where once it was the sole preserve of the men, nowadays the girls join in too, and women's gig racing is a regular event. There are a few old-timers, men of course, who claim that they seem to put a lot of effort into getting nowhere fast. But I won't join in that argument. If ever there was an event designed to work up a thirst, it's gig racing. And the ladies' teams are no slouches when it comes to replenishing the body fluid after a hard race. Every other gig is sponsored by a pub, but not so the girls from Tresco. So if you're feeling generous... Why do you do this? Doesn't that look like hard work out there? I was on a powerboat, not generous. You look like you were in agony.
We were.
Are you not sponsored?
No, not at all. We can give you a real sob story. We've got to row back to Tresco later.
Why?
Because we haven't got a tow.
Oh, the other boats have tows?
Well, yeah, basically, yeah.
They all live here.
I mean, apart from St. Martin's, who are out tonight, they get a following boat. They get a boat that follows them. We don't, so we row home again.
Bit rough, that. I mean, how often do you do that, then?
We race once a week and practice once a week.
Good for the figures.
Well, yeah, it looks like it is, yeah.
It's not just the gig racers who head for the Mermaid. Every time I go there seems to be a group of visiting French yachtsmen in port, and they always sing the same Breton song. One day I must learn what it means. I'm sure it's rude. If you're popping down to your local next week, might see you there.